Hi everyone, welcome back. Before we get started, I wanted to give a trigger warning for story number 3 for sexual assault on a minor. It's a pretty dark story, so if you don't want to hear it, now you know. I'll also have it labeled in the timestamps in case you want to skip it. All that being said, if you're all ready to get started on these stories, let's go ahead and begin. And remember to always stay hungry. For context, I'm a 33-year-old female with a 7-year-old son and a 5-year-old daughter. For our protection, I'm going to be using an alias for myself and letters for my children. I'll refer to myself as Carlee, my daughter is S, and my son is T. Now to the story. I decided to take S and T to a local park with a playground to run off some energy and enjoy the nice weather and extra daylight with the time change. S and T were running around and playing and just being kids. This park has 2 areas, one on a hill with a water park, pool, and a playground for smaller children, and a lower level, a greenway trail, playground equipment, and swings for older children. These areas are connected by a bridge and a big set of stairs. This is going to be relevant towards the end of the story. Anyway, my older sister and I were on FaceTime as we normally do a few times a day, and she was talking to me as I was watching them play. I never like to let S&T get too far away from me in general, but I guess I was far away enough for this creep to think he could try something. I was constantly surveying the area, keeping them in my line of sight, but still giving them space to play. Eventually, T wanted to come sit near the wall where I was sitting down at, and he asked to play with the phone and talk to his aunt, to which I agreed. T was beside me talking to her while I was watching S on a swing set from about 20 or 30 feet away, when I had noticed a man in jeans and a blue hoodie behind her about the same distance away, right near the Vietnam Veterans Monument facing the opposite direction. I'm generally a nervous and paranoid person, and I instantly got a bad feeling about this guy, so I instinctively started moving closer to S. He turned around and started walking toward the direction of S. I wanted to believe that maybe he had a child there at the playground as well, and was just giving them space to play while he took a few moments to himself. All of the parents out there know that we try to take advantage of those moments to ourselves to keep from losing our minds, but I digress. Anyway, as he was walking away and towards her, I noticed him looking at her. I don't mean just glancing and then going about your business. I mean full-on staring at her. She was swinging and she didn't even notice the man now standing at the opposite end of the swing set staring at her. At this point, he was less than 10 feet away from her, and at that point, T was still talking to my sister, but I then told him, "Let's go play with S," in a calm manner so as to not scare him, but at the same time running right over to her. As I got closer, I had noticed that he appeared to be around my age to maybe late 30s with a low cut and reddish blonde hair, and about 5'9", 5'10", an average build. I might only be 5'4", but at this point my mama bear attitude was every bit of 6'5". When the creep noticed me, he started to turn around and walk away. I wasn't going to let this shit fly though. I yelled at him, "Hey, stay the fuck away from my daughter, you sick fuck!" And also that he had no business being anywhere near her, especially without me present. I think that the other families took notice, but I can't be sure, as I had my back to them making sure this sick fuck was walking away so we could leave safely. He looked like a deer in the headlights. He then threw his hands up and started stammering, saying things like, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. I wasn't trying to," but couldn't even get a complete sentence out. Bullshit. I told him to get the fuck out of here and stayed put for a couple of minutes just to make sure he didn't try and come back and do anything as we walked away. I watched this piece of shit start to power walk away toward the direction that he first came from, and after he crossed over the bridge and went up the stairs, I then booked it to the car with S&T. As we left, I had called the local non-emergency number and then explained what happened and described the man to the officer. Being that he didn't actually touch her, I wasn't expecting anything to be done right away, but I wanted to be sure they were aware so they can increase the patrols that they already make in the area. Being that I was the victim of a predator as a child, I'm even more hyper aware of these types of situations, both as a mother and as a teacher. After I spoke with the officer and he took down my information, he said they would be in touch if they needed any additional information from me. If there are any updates, I'll be sure to provide them. Thank you all for listening, everyone, and be safe out there. I'd like to start off this story by mentioning that I live in the state of Washington, and in 2015, when I graduated high school, my parents decided to take a friend and I on a trip to Florida as a way of celebrating. We were gone for about a week, enjoying all of the beaches and restaurants. Our favorite restaurant we went to on our visit was a small seafood place called Frankie's Roll Bar. This restaurant was located in the Port Richey area of Florida, and is set on a dock right along the water where they would catch fresh seafood right there daily. Anyhow, this story doesn't quite take place on the trip, rather what happened when we got home. My mom decided to follow Frankie's Raw Bar on Facebook and upload our pictures that we took while there. Frankie was a pretty awesome guy, I must say so myself, and he gave my friend and I some food on the house just to try. All in all, the service was so fantastic we decided to take photos with Frankie and our waitress. It's no wonder my mom wanted to upload our photos to their Facebook page and then thank them for their service yet again. Well, a few weeks later, I had received a request from someone on Snapchat. I didn't recognize the name. I decided to accept it and see if it was someone I knew from school. It wasn't. A grown man had messaged me sending me Snapchat photos of himself. Thankfully, nothing inappropriate. He told me that his friend Frank had told him about me. I didn't put it together right away, but I was confused and was like, sir, I don't know anyone named Frank. He told me later on that it was Frank from the restaurant. I remember being freaked out, wondering why the restaurant owner would be telling random grown men about some 18-year-olds from out of town. I later started to think that he didn't actually know Frankie, and that he was probably just some creep and found our pictures that my mom had posted on their Facebook page. But the question always remained, how did this guy get my Snapchat? Maybe I had a public Facebook page and I had written it on my timeline at some point. That is the only logical explanation. Well, I thought the situation was creepy and weird, so I blocked him. About a year later, a girl I was friends with on Facebook named Blaze. She had gone to my high school, but we didn't actually know each other in person. She posted screenshots of Facebook messages that she had received from someone that were very strange. The profile picture looked like a woman in a hijab, but the person sending her messages was a man. He sent her pictures of himself, and they were that same guy that had messaged me just a year earlier on Snapchat. He said that he was using his sister's Facebook to send messages, and he told her that he owned a knife store and wanted to see if she was interested in purchasing some knives. Blaze had screenshotted all of this, and she posted it to her page to show everyone what a creep this guy was. I privately messaged Blaze, and I told her of my situation with that guy just a year prior, and I told her to not trust him. I should also mention that Blaze had just recently moved to Florida. I'm not sure if this man lived in Florida, but I thought it was odd. What were the chances of him finding us both from the state of Washington and then going on trips or moving to Florida? I thought it was strange. I decided to look the Facebook page up myself, and I began searching through the friends list. It was all girls. Young girls or older women posing in inappropriate poses. I thought to myself that this could be a human sex trafficker. I went and told my mom, in which she attempted to look up the Facebook account on her own, to find that she was then blocked from it. She couldn't see it even if I had sent her the link. Whoever this was clearly knew that my mom was my mom and didn't want her seeing their account. My mom told me they were definitely a predator and that I should block them. I decided on something different though. I decided to write into the TV show Catfish. I explained what had happened to me a year prior and to my friend Blaze earlier that week. I told them that we thought this person was sex trafficking young girls, I never heard back from the TV crew, but a week later the whole Facebook page was just gone. I'm not sure if Catfish ever got my message and did something about it, considering that their show was mostly about catching love interests online that weren't who they say they are. The situation wouldn't have been something their show made episodes about. I wasn't looking for it to go on TV though. I just didn't know what to do, and I thought that maybe they knew someone else who could. Either way, that Facebook page was gone, and Blaze never received any more messages from that weird man. Someone either reported them to the police, or else the crew of the TV show maybe did something to have it taken down. Either way, I'm glad Blaze and I never received anything else from that man, and I hope that to this day there aren't any more accounts with him on there. I hope that guy never did anything cruel to anyone, and I hope nobody ever hears from him ever again. Remember to be safe online, and please do not accept messages or requests from people that you don't know. Trigger warning for sexual assault. It wasn't easy to convince myself to bring this up, so please be respectful in the comments. My name for anonymity's sake is Valis, and I was about 12 to 14 years old when these events occurred, and I was rather sheltered from topics such as sexual abuse and assault until after I turned 17 years old. My public schools hardly ever touched on these things themselves. I had a best guy friend who I'll call Ahmed, who is also my older brother by a couple of years, and I didn't grow up with him since he was raised by our grandparents. He was very fascinated by topics such as spies, police officers, and the military, along with several other topics, and I was his playmate and confidant whenever he got bullied in school. I really loved listening to his stories of grandeur, and I thought he was the coolest person at the time. One day we were outside in a forested rural area with a gravel road when he asked if I would frisk him. I had a rough idea of what this was, so I had patted his shoulders and legs, but he then got upset that I didn't do his whole body too. I told him no, and he accepted that. Then he decided that he wanted to frisk me as well, like a police officer. Now, as I said, I was rather sheltered, and I didn't realize what was inappropriate for other people to be doing to me. But there were some things that I was not comfortable with because my intuition said so. When he got to my pants and shoved his hand down there in that area, I had told him to stop, but he didn't listen. Ahmed sexually assaulted me until he was done, and I'd been paralyzed the entire time. What the fuck did he do that for? I knew if I told anyone, no one would believe me since no one was around to see it happen, and he was always a golden child among our cousins and I. I stayed quiet, but as time went on, things remained awkward between us, and he tested the waters again by making up sexually explicit and graphic horror stories, which I often told him to stop, and I would walk away from him for a few hours. When I'd been about 14, my depression was at an all-time low, and I didn't care about much anymore due to unrelated trauma that lasted through my childhood. I stayed the night at our grandparents' one night since our mom needed the weekend off. Ahmed and I talked all throughout the night about anything and everything, when I had fallen asleep in his room at about 2 a.m. I was a very hard sleeper back then, so it was pretty difficult for me to get up once I fell asleep. Rather than leaving me alone, this fucker decided to kiss me before coming up behind me and touching me. I woke up but was again way too paralyzed to do anything. I was in survival mode, and I kept my eyes shut and legs closed as he then humped me from behind and then fondled my breasts. I don't know how long it lasted for before he finally walked away. The only evidence of him being there was my undone bra, which I confronted him about the next day. Do you know what this piece of crap actually said to me? What the fuck, Valis? Of course I didn't do that. I don't like you that way and you're imagining things. I was so ashamed, and to this day I really regret never telling our grandparents or our mother about what happened. To this day we're not very close anymore because of these events, and we live in different parts of the world now. I hope to never encounter him again. Now that this has been over 10 years since these events occurred, I've been attending therapy sessions for complex PTSD, major depressive disorder, as well as general anxiety disorder. If you've ever been assaulted, regardless of your age or gender, please don't do what I couldn't do and advocate for your own safety even if it is family who's harming you. It is disgusting and violating behavior that no one should ever have to experience, and I hope that any parents out there will teach their children from an early age about sexual predators and bodily autonomy. It isn't talked about enough. Have a good day or night, everyone, and please be careful out there. America Online was a really big thing when I was 13, or in other words for my generation, AIM, which stood for, you guessed it, AOL Instant Messenger. It was around 2002, and I would have been a fresh 13 and in 8th grade. I had many times gone into chat rooms all by myself or with friends just goofing around. Unfortunately, unsolicited photos were a thing then too, but usually you could stay clear of it by the chat room you entered. I didn't have any photos of myself, and back then you had to take a digital photo and then upload it from your camera. Plus, I was 13 and self-conscious, which I'm sure anyone can relate with. But one day a guy popped up on my screen wanting to chat. It went fine. At first. I was very naive back then, and we quickly fell into a pattern of talking. His name was Dave and he lived in California. Eventually he told me he loved me, etc. But the problem was he was 19. Now, I wasn't proud of this, but at first at 13 I just sent pictures of some random girl and said it was me. He instantly fell for me, telling me that age is just a number and how mature I was. Now at this point he didn't live in state, so there was never a chance of us meeting. Eventually he told me that him and his mom are moving up to a city that was about an hour and a half away from me. He then started begging me to see him and go to a movie, anything. I had to break the catfishing truth and say that those pictures weren't me but of someone else. He was furious. He had been looking forward to a different type of child this whole time. Dave forgave me a few days later, then saying, "Well, I still want to meet you because I love you." All the things you say to a young girl to get her to swoon. I think back and I'm like, wow, I was 13. So I told my best friend all of this and that I wanted her to go with me to meet him. There was a whole plan about him driving to see me and going to the movies to finally meet who I thought was the love of my life. I had been brainwashed into believing this was normal. I didn't tell my mom, of course, and honestly, she didn't notice any of it. She's never really been too involved, if you catch my drift. So the day my friend and I were going to meet up with Dave, her mom came and picked us up from school. She said something that made my stomach drop into nothingness. She then said, "Chrissy, you're not going to the movies. You're not going to meet that man. You're going to get seriously hurt or kidnapped, and I can't allow you guys to go." I cried and cried because I honestly thought I could handle everything and just be fine. She told me that she wasn't going to tell my mom, but I had to promise to never speak to him again and to never plan to meet a stranger online. Well, he ended up showing up and he was really upset that I wasn't there. He went on AIM flying off the handle like I hadn't seen at that age. It scared me. It scared me how close I was to this man being near me. I never talked to Dave again, but I easily believe that I would have been kidnapped or worse that day if my best friend's mom hadn't stepped in. My own mom would have been none the wiser. I was none the wiser, but I'm here today and I learned a dire lesson. Nobody is what they seem, and make sure to keep your kids close.